Welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast, where our job is to help you build visibility, professional credibility, and connection with your ideal client by putting the human at the center of innovative marketing, so you can build and strengthen an engaging, enduring relationship with your ideal clients. I'm Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBiz, and I'm honored that you're here with me. If you haven't joined our wonderful marketing transformation community yet, go to innovabiz.co and collect your free gift as well. Do subscribe to the show and also leave a review because it helps others find us. Let's get into today's masterclass on this InnovaBuzz podcast.
When you go and you expose yourself to something that's pushing you way outside your comfort zone, all those other things in life aren't as scary, and you can move towards the things that you truly desire with less fear, less anxiety, and more confidence.
Welcome back. I hope your week's been fantastically awesome so far. If you haven't yet listened to my recent conversations with business coach and strategist Louisa Joe and with Brian Jones of VA Platinum, why not? Seriously, go check them out after you've listened to today's conversation. I'm really excited to have on the InnovaBuzz podcast as my guest today, Jon Christian Jervert, a human performance improvement strategist. Jon has more than 20 years of consulting experience encompassing work with thousands of individuals and companies all around the world. He also is author of The 5 Challenges. He's a podcast host and a keynote speaker. As the lead facilitator for Blackpoint Standard Consulting Group's Zerkers division and founder of the Challenge Academy, Jon has a passion for helping individuals overcome fear and gain the clarity and confidence to pursue their dreams. His 5 Challenges program teaches individuals and business leaders how to relentlessly focus on creating a life they love. In our discussion, Jon talked to me about embracing fear and being more visible by doing just 4% more each time. We talked about accepting rejection as a process to learn from by removing the outcome from your identity. And we talked about balancing life through the 7 levels of consciousness and the 5 pillars of conscious human performance. Without further ado then, let's fly into the hive and get the buzz from Jon Christian Jervert. Hi, I'm your host Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBiz, and I'm really excited to welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast today, all the way from Rumson, New Jersey in the USA, Jon Christian Jervert, who is an adventure enthusiast, a human performance improvement strategist. He's a podcast host, he's author of The 5 Challenges, and he's also a keynote speaker. Now, your proven conscious human performance and challenge method optimizes mental and physical performance, resulting in increased focus, flow, and freedom in challenging environments. So that sounds really exciting, something I'd love to explore further. So welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast, Jon. It's a great privilege to have you as my guest.
Thank you, Jürgen. I appreciate it.
Now, Jamie Greenberg, who was our guest on episode 117 and is a mutual friend of both of us, he suggested that we have a conversation with you and introduced us. So big hello to Jamie.
Jamie's an amazing guy, and I'm really glad that he introduced us.
All right. Now, as I say, one of the things that your main focus is proven conscious human performance. So tell us a little bit more about what drives you and how you discovered that as a concept and how you share that with the world.
Yeah, it's amazing. You know, you follow these paths in lives and you start stumbling on these different strategies and methodologies, and you don't know what you're doing at the time, but eventually it becomes very clear. And the way my journey started is I spent, 10 years in the banking industry. And then one day my daughter came to me, she said, "Dad, do you love what you do?" And I couldn't honestly look her in the eyes and tell her I did. And that set me on a journey. And I started doing things that I put off for many, many years. And, I started doing things like skydiving and bungee jumping and endurance races and Tough Mudders and just pushing myself way outside my comfort zone. And that actually led me to backpacking 3/4 of the coast of Costa Rica and surfing with crocodiles. And what I started to realize is that those physical experiences were shifting my mental well-being and confidence and helped me overcome fear. So I came back to the States and I started facilitating adventure challenge experiences for people, but then connecting the mental component to it. And so I had people write their own obituary before they jumped out of an airplane, or talk about flow state, before whitewater rafting, and the water representing flow and the rocks representing obstacles in life. And I didn't know it at the time, but I was actually developing this conscious human performance model, and taking the physical and the mental, and then looking at a person's consciousness as they're going through those experiences. And it led me to developing an assessment to bring people through, to match those levels of consciousness with how they're operating under stressful environments. And that's kind of how that was developed.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I was going to ask some more about the idea of conscious, why conscious human performance. And I guess what you've outlined there is bringing some of the things that perhaps are unconscious, like the fear of the unknown, into conscious being. So explain that a little bit more to us, because I'm sure there's probably more to it than that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So basically, there's 7 levels of consciousness. So if you study spiral dynamics or energy leadership, concepts developed by, Bruce D. Snyder, and, I'm an energy leadership master practitioner. So part of what I studied was levels of consciousness. So if you look at the 7 levels, level 1 being somebody maybe in a victim mode, or somebody that, feels like the world's happening to them. They feel helpless. Level 2 might be somebody who is feeling anger or frustration or rage. Level 3 is somebody that might be rationalizing their situation and, making up excuses of why things are happening to them. Somebody in a level 4 level of consciousness could be somebody that overextends himself as a helper. Think of the mother that overextends herself and doesn't take care of herself. Level 5 is somebody that is filled with a lot of overwhelm and, a lot of ideas and scattered. And then level 6 is somebody that might be following a spiritual path. They've kind of stepped away from society, and are really connected to nature. And then you have level 7, which is where the spiritual meets the logical and practical. And that's where we want to work to attain, to have that logical connection with the spiritual aspect. So if you look at the way you approach things and go into stressful situation, usually there's a default. So if you're driving down the road and all of a sudden somebody cuts you off and you start yelling at them, you're automatically being pulled into a lower level of consciousness. And that's destructive, catabolic energy. So you can look at any situation in life, and now with this new awareness, you can approach that stressful situation in a different way, instead of being, you have choice now, as opposed to just being pulled into a level of consciousness that you don't have control over. So that's what I mean by levels of consciousness incorporated into your human performance in any aspect. And this could happen at work, with interactions with a colleague. It can happen with your relationships with your wife or your kids. And it also happens in health. Like if you think about days that you're wanting to work out, but you feel no energy, right? So you can think about, maybe you're feeling lethargic. So maybe I'm stuck in level 1. So how can I think about approaching this task at a little, like a higher level, like level 7 or so, and then take action from there.
Yeah, I love it. I'm a big fan of spiral dynamics, and I can see how you've kind of integrated that into your model. The example you gave is quite a simple one. I think a lot of those behaviors have been playing out, before our eyes in a really great way, to see many of those different levels at play in the last 14 months or so, with the pandemic and the lockdowns and the various mandates that governments have put on to try and control the pandemic, and people sort of rebelling against lockdown and rebelling against mask wearing and other measures that governments have put into place to try and stem the spread of the pandemic. So what do you see as some of the behaviours there, and how do you see people, or what can we do to kind of encourage everybody to get to that higher level in terms of what's good for us in controlling the pandemic, but what's also good for the greater good in terms of getting rid of the whole thing for everybody?
Yeah. I had this conversation recently with a good friend of mine, and it was around, the masks and wearing them, and the issue of like, it's a right not to, and it's a right, it's protective to, and everybody's across the board as far as, freedom, and versus safety, right? And so you've seen people, say you go work out at the gym or you go to the supermarket. And I'm sure if you've been to those areas recently and somebody doesn't have the mask on or has it pulled down halfway, there's going to be a potential confrontation, because people get very emotionally charged about that. And then so now you have one person that's angry and now the other person angry, right? Because we're attached to our egos, and anger comes from ego. So for the pandemic, specifically for this conscious human performance, is to look at it from a higher level. So when you're in anger, you can't see solutions in level 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, or 7. So you're kind of blind to that. That's what, kind of that term blind rage comes from. You can't it's very difficult to make decisions when you're coming from anger and emotion. So if you have a split second in those moments when, say, you're the person that is on the receiving end of that, you could either escalate and move down to a lower level of consciousness and meet anger with anger, or you could say, so the spiritual piece, the logical piece is, well, let me step into that person's perspective for a moment. And that person is feeling fear. That person is angry. Stepping outside of your own ego and putting that aside and saying, this is actually a moment in time for me to love this person. And when you say love this person, love and respect their perspective. And if you could do that, you're going to operate at a higher level, and the outcome is going to be much more. So for me personally, when that happens, I think, well, maybe I don't want to wear the mask, but out of respect for another human being, I'm showing my love and compassion by wearing it and protecting that person, even if I'm like 6 feet or 8 feet away. So really healthy way to look at it is to just step aside and saying, am I making this about me, as opposed to the other human being across from me? And I think if we could all do that and hold that paradox, with our opinions, then I think we can all, there'd be less conflict in general with this pandemic,
Yeah, and in general, all around.
Yeah.
I think, yes, so essentially what you're suggesting is suspending judgment of the other person and then looking to understand their point of view by kind of shifting perspective.
Yeah, it's actually, if you can look at it from the standpoint of, so there's actually a third way to look at it. So if you're in a default, right, and you're, say, rationalizing, or the other person's in anger, you can now step outside of yourself and outside of them and look at it from a third party standpoint. Mm-hmm. So now you're observing your human consciousness from a higher level of perspective, which then allows you to look at the holistic picture and figure out a win-win scenario, as opposed to being sucked into the drama of it.
Yeah.
Like we're seeing across the United States.
Yeah, it's kind of a third-party observer, isn't it? And that removes you from the ego of your own views or biases, but also of, it takes you outside of both situations and gives you the ability to essentially provide feedback. Like one of the exercises that are often done, we use it a lot in our workshops, is one person does the activity, the other person is the receiver of the activity. Let's say it involves a give and take scenario. So one person is the giver, one person is the taker, and the third person is the observer who gives feedback to both of them, how well they did the activity and what can be improved. So it's in a way, it's that model, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's much more easier said than done a lot of times, especially, if you've been married for any length of time or in relationships, sometimes that gets away from you. But, if people can come together at a middle point and almost have like, something that comes up, it's like, hey, we're kind of stepping into this, it's a much better outcome. But yeah, not always easy to implement in the moment.
Yeah. I'm sure. Yeah. Well, I know myself, I get angry at things. Often I get angry at my computer, and of course it can't talk back. But then, once I calm down, I have exactly the realization that you talked about, that, well, that didn't really do anything. I mean, the computer's not even going to react to any of my emotions. So it's done is heighten my stress level and close my mind to, well, how can I deal with the issue that I'm actually having?
Yeah. And a lot of times, a lot of people think that just because I say lower level consciousness and anger are destructive, I mean, that's not always the case, so sometimes stating and choosing anger is good, like if protecting your family or something, dangerous is happening, so we don't want to categorize things as good or bad. That choice is more the
Yeah. And also in terms of denying your own feelings of anger as a response to something may not necessarily be in your best interest either, isn't it? So, as you say, an outlet is sometimes good for the environment or the situation, but sometimes it's also good just for yourself.
Absolutely.
As long as it's a healthy outlet and nobody else suffers.
Totally.
So you talked about overcoming fear in terms of some of the activities that you did yourself when you're on this journey of discovery, and also the activities now you've built into your program. So talk to us a little bit more about that. Is it overcoming fear, or is it understanding and embracing your fear and using it to your advantage?
Yeah, I love that word, embracing. So it is a little bit of overcoming, and it is a little bit of embracing. But, I spent a number of years, like putting off things or thinking that I wasn't able to do them. And, I was, there's lots of responsibilities as a parent, right? And sometimes it's scary to take a leap of faith in life, do something that you're really passionate about, when you have responsibilities. But I'd gotten to a point where I was burnt out. I was tired. I didn't have energy. I've always been in pretty good shape, but, I was out of shape for where I could be. And, you just wake up one day and you're like, there's something has to change. And in order for something to change, you have to take some sort of action, and taking that action is sometimes fearful. There's a lot of fear. So it's almost like jumping off a cliff without a parachute and hoping that you'll hit the ground. So what I actually did is, I went and reached out to my childhood surfing hero who surfed 60-foot waves, and he was the number one surfer in the world at one point. And so he taught me how to overcome fear and kind of step into things that are very uncomfortable. And so, you don't right away go surfing a 60-foot wave. You go out into, the lineup, you look at it, then you move a little bit closer. And this is with any size wave and overcoming fear. And I love using physical experiences as analogies because you can look at surfing also as commitment. So, commitment when you're dropping into a wave is important because if you don't commit, then usually you'll put yourself in a bad situation. So that was the one piece of overcoming fear. And then the other was the skydiving experiences. So basically, jumping out of a plane really puts into perspective everything else in life. So if there's a fear, even bringing it back to going up and talking to somebody, maybe at a bar, if you're single, there could be fear there. But when you go and you expose yourself to something that's pushing you way outside your comfort zone, all those other things in life aren't as scary, and you can take moves towards the things that you truly desire with less fear, less anxiety, and more confidence. So overcoming fear is a huge step and harnessing that. So when I start to feel fear, fear's cousin is excitement. So if I'm feeling fear, it translates to excitement, and I know something on the other side of that boundary is going to be positive as I step through it.
All right. Well, that's fascinating. So I'm just painting this picture. So if somebody's a little shy and is having problems speaking to people, and overcoming that shyness, what you're suggesting is that they do some skydiving.
Yeah, well, they could go that extreme, if they're brave enough to do so, and that'll definitely help them overcome a lot of fear. But actually, you don't have to go as extreme. So what you can use is this idea of the 4% challenge theory. And what that says is basically all you have to do is challenge yourself 4% more than what you're used to. And then you build up that fear resilience. So, maybe it's a person going up and talking to a person at a bar is that 4%, or maybe it's going out and, going on a hike, or, going up somewhere that is, if they're afraid of heights, like maybe going up to the top of a mountain and kind of looking over just a little bit. So you don't have to go so extreme, but, you definitely want to challenge yourself at least 4% more than you normally do. But the skydiving thing, actually, there's an interesting thing that did happen. So first time, you're clenched up, you're fearful, you're scared, you're terrified. And then what happens is, it was interesting. The instructor I jumped with, he said, that when I went the second time, he said he hasn't jumped with anybody more relaxed. So the second time is almost like this surrender and just relaxation. It's a completely different experience. So if you're going to do that to overcome some fears and to gain some confidence, I'd say go once and feel that fear and that anxiety and that tension. And then the second one, just feel that relaxation and surrender to what's going to happen, is a very powerful experience.
Well, the skydiving, I imagine that in the skydiving scenario, because you pretty much got the outcome in your hands, as long as the instructor's taking care of all the environmental things, so that you're not jumping out in gale force winds or other conditions that would be dangerous. But like the example of going and talking to somebody, stranger at a bar, let's say, now there's a pretty good chance that person will tell you to get lost and give you a rejection. So that isn't that going to heighten the fear the next time around?
Well, not if you go into it, with the consciousness and the awareness, where we know that the reason why rejection feels so bad, or maybe it's not so aware in society, is that back in the tribal days, if we were rejected from the tribe, it meant certain death, getting kicked out of the tribe. So really, when we go up and we talk to individuals, or we get in front of people on stages, or, put ourselves out there, and we feel that fear, it's not actually the fear of all the things that are happening now. It's that thing that's in our DNA, survival mechanism. So if we can realize that when we're doing that, be like, oh, I'm feeling this way when I get rejected because my body is trying to protect me from years and years and years of genetic DNA programming. And then it's like, okay, then you can kind of understand and feel it and step outside of it again and be aware of what your body's doing and the chemicals that are triggered in your body, and kind of step into that discomfort. So as long as you go into it with that awareness, when it does happen, then it's a healthy challenge, as opposed to something that may traumatize you or put you back into a shell. So it's really kind of going into it with that awareness. And really the consciousness is all about awareness, about how our bodies are reacting to certain situations, how our minds are reacting to certain situations, and taking it from the subconscious into the awareness. And then we can shine a light on it and be like, looking at it from an objective standpoint. And then it's practice. So then if you go up and you get rejected, maybe you go and have a conversation with somebody, or you're talking, if you're an entrepreneur, you talk to a client and you're getting rejected, and it's feeling, you could basically have these emotional highs and lows. So I've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs over the years, and when business is great, I'm feeling great, my ego and everything feels good. But when it's low, especially with, everything that's going on in the economy and the pandemic and everything, there's a lot of people that are going through challenges. And when their identity is hooked onto that outcome, i.e., going up and talking to the person at the bar, or, acquiring clients, it's the same type of feeling. So instead of having emotional ups and downs, you now have a pretty steady level point of view from any standpoint. And then you can focus on the activity and not the outcome. And therefore it's not as traumatizing, or, not emotionally devastating.
Yeah, I like that concept of focusing on the activity rather than the outcome. It's kind of like, enjoy the process, enjoy the journey. And if you get the process right, then it's a case of just following that same process again and not being attached to the outcome. And you said, that you're hooking your identity into the outcome. So then it goes back to ego, doesn't it? So you get rejected. So it's a challenge to your identity. So it is that saber-toothed tiger jumping out of the bushes. Whereas if you divorce it from your identity, if you say, well, the outcome here could be a yes or it could be a no, and either way, it's fine. And look at it from what did I learn through the process?
Yeah. And then if you're attached to that outcome, you're going to keep on burning yourself out. So, a good sign that you're at like maybe a level 5 consciousness is that's a lot of achievement and a lot of competition. And, business can be a lot like that. And what happens is that there's this emotional roller coaster, especially in sales, where you might have high highs, right? And then low lows. So this over years and years and years creates burnout. And so if you keep on that emotional roller coaster, you're eventually going to burn out. So what we want to do is create, a performance mindset where you're having a steady state throughout your career, and not those emotional highs and lows that can now affect your family and your wife and your kids. There was one guy that I'd been working with that hadn't slept in 3 days and wasn't spending time with his kids, and that can be a very, very difficult situation to pull yourself out of.
All right. Now, in the conscious human performance model, you talk about 5 core pillars. So maybe you could recap those for us, because I think you've probably touched on all of them, but maybe you could recap them for us and tell us a little bit about the key things within each pillar that we should be looking out for to improve our conscious performance.
Absolutely. And there's actually 2 models, one for an individual and one for corporations. So corporations, believe it or not, have their own level of own consciousness, collective consciousness. So the first one is for individuals, and basically it breaks down into 4 quadrants, and then adventure around it. So adventure and experiences is really important in life. So if we look at it, there's consciousness, and that is looking at our energy and our awareness. So we look at how we're feeling when we're moving through our day energetically, and then our awareness of how we are aware and present of our surroundings, or how we might be stuck in our heads, and awareness of the situation. And then we look at connection, which is the love and the relationship piece of our life. And we look at our tribe, the people that we surround ourselves with. And then we're looking at our contribution, which is abundance in the financial aspect of our lives and our career. How fulfilled are we in our life? How passionate are we about what we're doing? And then we look at our commitment, and that's our commitment to our fitness and our health. And so when we combine all these different areas, a lot of times people may be operating, say, at a high level of consciousness in their relationships and their tribe, the people they surround themselves with, and maybe they're not aligned in their career, or maybe they're not making as much as they'd like to be making, or maybe a lot of times this happens with executives and those that are in successful roles is that maybe their career and their abundance is great, but their health and their fitness is low. So they're resonating low energetically and consciously in those areas, and potentially their love and their relationships are suffering. So the idea is to really consciously balance out those areas of our life through shifts. So there's basically 70 questions, and there's very specific ways to shift yourself and work on one thing at a time to increase the level of fulfillment in our lives through that conscious human performance model. And then the corporate version of that looks at the same thing, energy and awareness under consciousness, but then we look at the culture of the organization, the performance and the engagement, how engaged people are in that career. And the truth is 80% of the world's population isn't fulfilled in their careers, which is something I'm super passionate about changing. And then we look at your wellness and health similarly to the personal. So it can be applied across the board, and everything starts with the individual first, and then that carries over into other areas of life and business.
Yeah, I like the approach of starting with that self-awareness first, because those are the areas that we have control over, right? And so immediately moves you out of that victim mentality that you described earlier as the level one kind of layer. So it immediately takes you to, okay, I'm aware that here's some areas that perhaps are not as strong as I'd like them to be compared to other areas that may be stronger. So now I can focus on doing something with that.
Yeah, it's all about leading by example. And, I'd always told my daughter to follow her passion and to, do what she loved, right? But here I was not doing it. So leading from example. And from that day forward, I had to do it. I couldn't just preach it, So it's easy to talk about this stuff, but really to live it is the challenge. But, I've grown to love that challenge.
Yeah. All right. So what is it you do in your work with individuals and with teams? I mean, clearly you work. Yeah, clearly you use all these principles. What are the specific activities?
Yeah, so there's a few activities, and I've run retreats, to Costa Rica and had people do adventure experiences through Costa Rica. We've done retreats in Colorado where we hiked up 12,500 foot peaks. We've done all sorts of hikes and skydiving and mountain climbing. So what I did is I was, before the pandemic, running some outdoor retreats and group things. So what I've done is I've adapted a little bit. So I still do one-on-one coaching with individuals for executives and individuals that are looking to transition a career, maybe into a more aligned career or into a business that is fulfilling for them. And so as a result of the shift from outdoors activities, I developed a online program called The Challenge, which basically lays out 5 challenges for individuals to go through. And I've also recently launched a book called The 5 Challenges. And these 5 challenges are the 5 adventure challenges that I did in order to shift myself and to move into a completely fulfilling, rewarding career, build my relationship with my children, my family, and just completely transform my life and do things that I never thought I could have done without it. And I've taken that process and now applied that to the clients that go through the program, the 5 Challenges program. So it's online right now. And then if people need additional support, so the book is self-guided. The book comes with an online training, which is self-guided, and or, if people are looking for additional support, they can get the one-on-one, to really accelerate the process where I can develop custom adventure experiences based on the individual's challenge that they're facing. So for instance, say you're in a relationship with your wife, right? And maybe the trust isn't there so much. So one of the exercises I've done in the past with clients is have them do mountain climbing. And so mountain climbing is a lot about trust. So if the husband or wife is holding, the rope and the other one's going up the mountain, you really have to have trust and communication. So it's things like that. So I like to mix it up a little bit and really connect the physical experiences with the mental, physical with the mental experiences. And another example is I had a client that, was in a bit of a rocky relationship and wound up doing an adventure race, an endurance race, and brought one of his a female that he was interested with, and they eventually got married as a result of that. So all sorts of fun stories.
Great. Yeah.
Yep.
Great case study. Yeah. All right. Well, this is fabulous. I can explore some more. We'll talk a little bit in a moment about where people can find out more about you and get in touch. But I think it's a good point now to move on to the buzz round, which is our innovation round, designed to help our audience who are primarily innovators and leaders in their field with some tips from your experience. So I have 5 questions. Hopefully you'll give us some more insightful answers, but in this occasion to inspire people to actually go and do something awesome today as a result of these answers.
Absolutely.
So what's the number one thing that you think anyone needs to do to be more innovative?
It's got to be overcome that fear, that the fear that's holding you back. It's like, if you got that thing in your heart, just do it. Just put it out there. Put it out there in a raw form. And, people will see that passion and that thing will just continue to grow and never give up, on that idea, and just keep on innovating. It's a constant process.
Yeah. And you touched on the why you do your work before, and what I think is coming across there with the overcoming the fear and taking action, putting something out there. Don't wait for perfection. Put it out there, let people see why you're passionate about that. And I think, what generally happens is people get on board and they embrace it, even though it might not be perfect, and they're willing to help you improve it.
Mm-hmm. Especially loved ones, like, so those that are in relationships or things like that, following this path of innovation and doing things that are outside what most would say is a comfort zone or something that's new. A lot of times you face challenges and maybe not support in certain circumstances, right? In relationships. And, because I've had that passion and that drive in my heart, my wife has supported me the whole entire time that I've been on this journey. So never let that passion die. It's so key to getting the support that you need, not only from internal relationships, but also external in the world. People can pick up on that.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so what's the best thing you've done to develop new ideas?
The best thing that I've done is actually to create space for myself. So practicing doing nothing or doing less. And what I mean by that is, taking time to take hikes and take walks, meditate. I do a lot of surfing, so getting out in the water and just detaching from the world. Really, I think we can be sucked into this accomplishment, which puts more and more on our plate, as opposed to creating space in our minds to allow those ideas to flow and to really feel into our next steps. And I'm really big into taking that time and opening up that space to let the ideas flow.
Yeah, I love that. I do very much similar things. I'm a great bike ride fanatic, some people say, and I also love photography. And if I do one of those activities, particularly if I go and do it on my own, I do get into this almost creative mindset and creative space where everything just falls away and I come up with new ideas. Or yesterday, for example, I've got this event coming up that I decided I need to spend the morning to prepare for this event and get everything organized. And then I thought, no, I'm going to go for a couple of hours bike ride first. And during that ride, I was on my own. During that ride, of course, going through my mind is how this event's going to play out, and I was visualizing it and everything. When I came back, it took me about 45 minutes to prepare the whole event, whereas I'd set aside the whole morning to do it. So I got in a 2-hour bike ride and still prepared the event.
It was probably even better. And then also the photography thing too is huge. I mean, just going out and looking at the world with a new set of eyes, or even the minute things is so you can look at a whole panoramic image and then focus in on one area, like a flower or the wind blowing through the leaves, and really capture that. So I love the idea of using photography to tap into that creativity and innovation as well, focusing on the bigger picture, and then also the picture within the picture.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of almost a natural metaphor, isn't it? We talk a lot about see the big picture and focus in. And, yeah. All right. Now, do you have a favorite resource you use most often?
Favorite resource? I read a lot of books. I read a lot of books. The biggest resource I have is the network that I've developed around me and the individuals that I've learned from. So mentors, and I've done a lot of due diligence around the people that I study and the information that I absorb. And so my biggest resource is my network of individuals, where I can go out and ask them, say, I need X, Y, and Z, or do you know somebody, or, the biggest resource is people and those that you surround yourself with. And that's for me, very, very strong for me.
Fantastic. I love it. And with books, do you read physical books?
No, I actually listen to Audible. So all of it is Audible. Yeah.
Audio. Yeah. Yeah. I just discovered this morning that Audible's doing podcasts now. This podcast is actually available on Audible as of early January.
Very cool.
Which I hadn't realized. But yeah, audio books is wonderful. I love listening to audio books when I'm doing other things as well.
Absolutely.
All right. Now, what's the best way to keep a client on track?
It's finding the reason why they're doing it in the first place. Because if you're trying to hold somebody accountable to something that they're not really bought into, they're not going to show up fully. They're not going to be invested. They're not going to go through the challenges in order to get to what they want. So one of the things that I do is help people find that why, that the Simon Sinek why. It's so important, and a foundation to understand, the purpose that you're on this earth and how your actions align with that purpose that you have. It's in taking action on it. So not only just understanding it, but, really taking decisive action on the things that you desire and never giving up, and knowing that things aren't going to go perfect. But, if you stick the path, you'll get to your destination. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it, I think, and reminding clients here's why, this is my understanding of why you want to achieve what we're looking to achieve here, and here's the next step. So let's reinforce that why.
100%.
And what's the number one thing anyone can do to differentiate themselves?
Not be afraid to be you. So the differentiation, and when you can step into yourself and be comfortable in your own skin, it really differentiates you. And it's not necessarily about what you do. It's really who you're being inside. And that beingness, it differentiates you from everybody else in this world, as opposed to trying to mimic. You learn from the best, and you pick up some things. But really, if you can just be comfortable being you, that is the most important thing that you can do. The different.
Yeah, there's two things you touched on there, and I think it's really actually a challenge to get that balance right, learning from people who we consider role models without actually copycatting them, and losing our own personality and our own gifts.
Yeah. A good question to ask is who am I? Every day before you go to sleep or when you wake up. And answer,
who am I being?
Who am I?
And who am I? Yeah, that's how we start our entire marketing journey. First question.
Yep.
All right. Well, this has been fabulous, Jon. Thanks for all that you've shared. Now, where can people find out more about you and your programs, and maybe even reach out and say thanks for what you've shared today?
Absolutely. So you can go to the website, which is Zerkers.com, Zerkers.com. And if you visit Zerkers.com/book, you can get a copy of the 5 Challenges book that is in pre-launch right now and on Amazon shortly.
All right, great. And we'll have links to that in the show notes. So where's the name Zerkers come from?
So I am a really big Zach Wilde fan, and originally the business was named Business Berserkers, because I love the Viking background. And one of my mentors said to me, you should make it more like a tribe of individuals. I'm like, tribe. And so Zach Wilde calls his fans Berserkers, and I'm like, all right. So I shortened it to Zerkers, and it basically stands for Underground Warriors for the People. And those are individuals that are dedicated to impacting the world in positive ways and pursuing their passions.
Love it. It's always great to have a really powerful meaning behind just the name of the business.
Yep.
All right. Now, do you have any parting advice for our listener today?
I would just say, with everything that's going on in the world right now, things are turned upside down. Surround yourself with amazing people, keep your connections strong, and just never give up on the thing that's in your heart. Keep that fire alive, and, everything will work out.
That's great. Yeah. And human connection is so important, and that's been highlighted even more in these times, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. And finally, who else should I get on this show and why?
I'd love for you to meet Bobby Reyes. He's a really great friend of mine who, he's been there since the beginning. And, one of the things that he does is firewalking. So he learned, firewalking and arrow breaking, and he's just an amazing human being and really good friend. And he's one of those guys that you want to have in your corner. And he's a tremendous coach and consultant, and has a lot to offer the world for sure.
All right. Well, we'll get an introduction to Bobby from you and reach out to him and see if we can get him on the show as well.
Absolutely.
So thanks so much for sharing your time and your insights so generously with us today on the InnovaBuzz podcast, Jon. It's been a privilege to speak to you. It's been fun to learn all about your journey and the exciting adventures you've been on, but also how you've used those experiences to build your program and help people to rise to ultimate performance.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, all the best for the future, and let's stay in touch.
Thank you so much, Jordan. I really appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed that insightful and really valuable conversation with Jon and took something away from his episode. I particularly liked the idea of the 4% More Challenge to build confidence and overcome your fears, and how it can be applied to quickly launching a new program or product. I'd love to know what you took away from Jon's episode. Leave a comment below the blog post, which you can find at innovabiz.co/Jon Jervert. That is JONJERVERT. All lowercase, all one word, innovabiz.co/Jon Jervert. You'll also find contact information there for getting in touch with Jon, as well as links to the Zerkers website, to Jon's social media pages, and to the other resources we spoke about in our conversation today. Now, if you like this conversation and there's value in it for you, there must be value in it for many other people. So go ahead and share it with a couple of other people that it might help. Tag me in that share, and I will reach out to you with a special thank you gift for paying it forward. Jon suggested that we have a conversation with sales, communication and influence specialist Bobby Reyes on a future InnovaBuzz podcast episode. So Bobby, keep an eye on your inbox for an invitation from us to the InnovaBuzz podcast, courtesy of Jon Christian Jervert. Tune in again to the next episodes of the InnovaBuzz podcast, where we've got yet more fantastic guests lined up, including Stefano Mastriogiacomo, the author of High Impact Tools for Teams, and Michelle Mazur, the author of The 3-Word Rebellion. Thanks for listening to this episode. Make sure you subscribe to the show to be reminded of new episodes. It's free to subscribe. Leave a review if you like. Even if you don't like me, I'm okay with that. I'm asking you to leave a review because it helps other people find this show. Go to innovabiz.co to join our marketing transformation community and access a free gift my team and I made for you. It's the Marketing Master Mini Class. We want to give you everything you need to transform your marketing into a human-centered, relationship-focused growth engine. Until next time, I'm Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBiz. Remember, be awesome and keep innovating.